The crisis in Gaza continues as the Palestinian death toll mounts and tensions remain high between Israel and Hezbollah. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu and this is The Heat. Israel's assault in Gaza rages on, with the Palestinian death toll closing in on 45,000. Meanwhile, a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah that went into effect last month is under stress, and tensions between Israel and Iran remain high. We will discuss all of that later in the show, but we begin with Gaza and the dire humanitarian crisis there. Joining me now from Ramallah is Mustafa Barghouti. He is a medical doctor and president of the Palestinian Medical Relief Society. He's also founder and leader of the Palestinian National Initiative. Dr. Barghouti, thanks so much for joining us. Let's start with this humanitarian crisis in Gaza. There are fears of starvation. There's widespread hunger. We see these heartbreaking pictures of young children with empty containers, arms outstretched, trying to get what little aid is being distributed in Gaza. Can you give us some idea of the level of suffering there?
The suffering is beyond description, besides the fact that actually 55,000 people have been killed if we count the 10,000 who are still missing under the rubble. And more than 106,000 people have been injured, 25% of whom could die at any time, at any moment, because of lack of medical care and the Israeli destruction of most medical facilities. But in addition to that, for the last 64 days, Gaza is subjected to hunger, to starvation. In some areas like the north, nothing has gotten to the people. No water, no food, no humanitarian supplies, no medical care, nothing. And people are going to die from starvation. But the rest of Gaza is also suffering because, according to United Nations Relief and Work Agency, the amount of aid that has gotten to Gaza is less than 6% of what is really needed. It's not just about hunger and starvation. It's also about diseases that are spreading due to lack of food, poor nutrition, malnutrition, and also because of depressed immunity. According to our medical teams in Gaza, no less than 1.7 million people now are suffering from diseases. 112,000 people are suffering from infectious hepatitis, which has affected them. Hundreds of thousands are suffering from gastroenteritis, respiratory infections, skin diseases, besides the 10,000 people who are suffering from cancer with no treatment available whatsoever for them. It's the worst kind of terrible humanitarian crisis that one can imagine. And add to that the fact that Israel is allowing an implicit biological warfare and a chemical warfare, since what Israel has thrown on Gaza is no less than 86,000 tons of explosives, which is equal to more than 4 times the explosive power of the nuclear bombs that were thrown on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the Second World War. It's 36 kilograms of explosives for each man, woman, and child. And these explosives have left lots of chemicals around. Some of it was made of depleted uranium, which could represent a very serious, disastrous effect on people's health in the long run.
As you say, Dr. Barghouti, Israel has dropped tens of thousands of tons of bombs on Gaza, and the military assault continues. Dozens more Palestinians were killed over the weekend, including more than 20 at a refugee camp. There were more killed when Israeli forces stormed a hospital. Israel says Hamas fighters are using these buildings for cover. These civilians are being used as shields. What is your response to that?
Israel is lying. They couldn't prove a single moment, a single case where hospitals were used by fighters. It's a lie. It's a big lie. And they continue to lie. And the last attack on Kamal Atwan hospital has no justification whatsoever. They bombarded the hospital several times. They injured the director of the hospital. They killed several of the Palestinian health workers. They even killed the son of the director of the hospital. And these are not fighters, these are health providers. According to our information, no less than 1,080 of my colleagues, doctors, nurses, and health professionals were killed by Israeli bombardment. These were not fighters at all. So Israel's justification, the claim that the hospitals are used for military purposes is an absolute lie to justify the unjustified bombardment of the medical facilities. Also, I want to mention that Israel did not allow a single foreign journalist into Gaza to hide the reality of what's happening there. Why don't they allow foreign journalists to come in? Because they want to keep lying and they want to cover up their lies. And at the same time, they have killed at least 90 Palestinian journalists with their bombardment. There is no justification whatsoever. And the talk about human shields is correct, but it's not Palestinians who are using civilians as human shields. We have proofs of Israeli soldiers using Palestinian civilians as human shields in their attacks in Gaza.
Amnesty International released a major report last week alleging that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. Israel, for its part, has repeatedly denied these accusations. What is your response to what Amnesty had to say?
I think Amnesty made a very clear report. It's with proofs, it's with documentations, it's with very clear testimonies. And it's not the first organization that says that there is genocide in Gaza. And it's a highly respected human rights organization. And I'm sure the International Court of Justice will come to the same conclusion, that it is genocide that is practiced in Gaza. And not just genocide. Actually, Israel is conducting in parallel 3 war crimes at the same time. The war crime of genocide, the war crime of collective punishment, including starving people and starving children, and the war crime of collective punishment and ethnic cleansing. I believe the International Criminal Court was very clear about all of that, confirming that war crimes have happened. And that's why they've indicted Netanyahu and his ex-minister of defense for committing these war crimes. And I'm sure so many other Israeli generals will be also accused of war crimes in the coming period. I want to also add that the biggest suffering is on the side of children and women. 70% of the 55,000 Palestinians killed are children and women. 17,000 children, and the level of amputation per population is now the highest in Gaza Strip in the world.
Right. In fact, the United Nations said recently that Gaza now has the most child amputees per capita in the world. I'm going to talk about the situation in the occupied West Bank, which is where you are right now. Colonial settlers there continue to unleash violence on Palestinians. It has ramped up significantly, looking at the figures here, since the Hamas attack inside Israel in October 2023. How bad is it? Because we see Palestinians being forced out of their homes, forced off their land as well, their homes in some cases being burned down.
Absolutely. The Israeli illegal settlers behave as terrorist gangs attacking Palestinian communities. Up till now, since October 7th last year, the Israeli settlers have evicted and ethnically cleansed 28 Palestinian communities in the West Bank, under the supervision and support of the Israeli army. It's a combination of the attacks by both the Israeli army and the Israeli illegal settlers. Most recently, they started to attack cities again, like Hawara, like Beta, like Doma, like many other places where they burn houses, they burn cars, and they're shooting at people. During this season of olive harvest, the number of Israeli settlers' attack on Palestinian farmers increased by 300%. So this is all happening while the Israeli army is watching. And more than that, the Israeli army is arresting Palestinians instead of arresting those gangs of terrorists. We have had at least 12,000 Palestinians arrested since October 7th last year, and thousands of them are put under the so-called administrative detention, which means they don't know why they are arrested. There are no charges. Their lawyers don't know why these people are put in jail. And people can be put in jail without charges for years. And on top of that, we have lost so many of them who were killed because of torture in prison. At least 60 prisoners have been killed in Israeli prisons since October 7th.
What are the prospects for a ceasefire in Gaza? I know you present a very bleak picture, horrific picture really, and that's putting it mildly, of what's going on there. Do you foresee a ceasefire in the short term?
We could have a ceasefire. There are some negotiations about that. The Palestinian side have shown a great amount of flexibility because they care about stopping these atrocities as soon as possible. But to be frank with you, I do not think that Netanyahu wants a ceasefire. And I don't think there will be a ceasefire unless finally the United States of America exercises real pressure on Netanyahu and his fascist government to stop this atrocity. Up till now, we don't see this pressure. On the contrary, the United States administration continues to blame Palestinians for what Netanyahu is doing, which is blocking the possibility of a ceasefire. The Palestinian side is ready. The Palestinian side wants to see ceasefire as soon as possible. We want people to be who were evicted from the north to have the chance to go back.
Yeah.
And we want these massacres to stop.
Dr. Barghouti, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And for much more on the Middle East crisis, joining me now from Jerusalem is Sara Yael Hirschhorn. She is a historian and political analyst. Also with us from London is Abdel Atwan. He is editor-in-chief of al-Youm. And joining the discussion too is Akbar Dareini. He is a researcher and writer at the Strategic Studies of Public Policy Journal in Tehran. Welcome to all of you. Sara, let me start with you. We just talked with Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. He is a Palestinian leader and a medical doctor, and he presented a picture of a worsening humanitarian situation in Gaza right now. He told us that hunger is widespread, there's starvation, very little aid is getting through, there's no water, there's no shelter, there's now disease spreading through parts of the population. People can't return to their homes, especially in northern Gaza. How does Israel explain this when it has been telling us for the past few months that its goal is to defeat Hamas and to get the release of the hostages? These are civilians, and the victims are mainly women and children.
I think Israel explains this in the same way that actually the UN Relief and Works Agency explains this, who has recently suspended operations at the Kerem Shalom crossing, which because what they called armed gangs, which I think was really a pseudonym for Hamas, have been stealing large amounts of aid that have been coming in through trucks and other kinds of convoys. So there's a real problem not only with the aid crossing into Gaza, but the distribution of the aid once it's in Gaza, and that's beyond really the control of the Israeli government. Clearly there's an issue with Hamas being able to distribute the aid and what amounts the aid that is taken, but also how other international humanitarian partners are able to acquire and distribute the aid in a war zone and with a deepening humanitarian crisis where the need may exceed demand. So it's a very challenging situation because really since the beginning of the war, there's been no clear options for aid distribution. The United States government tried airlifting aid. It tried to build a pier off of the port, off of Gaza, which sunk into the ocean, into the Mediterranean Sea. And various other options essentially to bypass Hamas distribution, but it's been an ongoing challenge, and clearly with the winter coming and cold weather setting in here, and over a year into the war, the humanitarian crisis is profound and deeply concerning.
Right, you say Israel has no control over the distribution of aid, that armed gangs have in many instances hijacked that aid, but Israel has a military in Gaza right now. It's one of the most powerful militaries in the world. Are you telling us that they've lost control over armed gangs in Gaza?
Look, I think there's also, according to the Oslo Accords, there's also a clear issue here of who is in charge and, in fact, is legally mandated to be aiding the Palestinian public in the distribution of humanitarian goods, in public health campaigns, with sanitation and other important environmental issues, which have been delegated to the governing power in Gaza, which, at the time that this document was signed in the 1990s, was the Palestinian Authority, but is now shifted to Hamas, which is an internationally recognized terrorist organization. So it's made very difficult to facilitate the distribution of aid, given the status of Hamas and also Israel's ability to maneuver. Israel clearly is there. They are continuing to operate in various parts of the Gaza Strip, but their responsibility for humanitarian distribution is part of the governing authority's responsibility.
Right, Sarah, one other development, and that is Amnesty International has released a report accusing Israel of committing genocide against the Palestinian people. And we even had a former Israeli defense minister, Moshe Yaalon, who said that Israel is committing war crimes and ethnic cleansing in Gaza. You know, we've heard very often the response from the Israelis rejecting these accusations. But is that becoming harder right now?
Well, I should say that the Israeli branch of Amnesty International itself has rejected the findings of this report alongside the Israeli government. But certainly the allegations are concerning. The question is whether does it meet the benchmark of genocide, or are these unfortunate and terrible consequences of a war that started on October 7th. The Amnesty International report, in fact, begins on October 7th, citing only Israel's invasion of the Gaza Strip and not what happened in preceding hours with Hamas's attack on southern Israel. And when it came to the actual charge of genocide, Amnesty International wrote that the international legal definition in their mind was too, quote unquote, cramped, and they've extended the definition to be more capacious to suit their findings. So I think there's a question here of what we are calling genocide, what is the internationally recognized definition of this term, and the realities of war. But no doubt that I think the Israeli population, who has had, many, there are reservists who have now spent months in Gaza, are coming back and telling stories of what it's like. And they are not, I think, mincing words of the true and profound humanitarian crisis that's happening in Gaza, whether or not this meets the benchmark of genocide, as Amnesty has reported.
Abdel Atwan, what is your response to what Sara Yael Hirschhorn has just told us there about the distribution of aid in Gaza? She also cited the Oslo Accords on who is in charge in Gaza right now and the humanitarian situation in the territory.
Controlling or distributing these human aid, that doesn't need, honestly, certain organization. We have the UNRWA is there. We can, this, United Nations organization, it can be distribute these human aids easily to the people in Gaza. It is highly respected, but the Israelis don't want this aid to reach the people in Gaza. They're having a starvation now, and we have to go back to the international criminal court, which said the Israeli actually are committing genocide there, and on the top of that, they are using starvation as a weapon to kill the Palestinian in Gaza. So now they are looking for excuse. America gave them a deadline. If you don't let this kind of international aids, these human aids, to reach the people starving in Gaza, we will stop all kinds of weapons to Israel and we'll have another measures against the Israelis. But they never respected their threat. They never respected this deadline. The Israelis want to kill the people in Gaza. And, that just a few days ago, they bombed the tents of the refugees, people who actually displaced, and they killed children and they killed the women. Every day they kill at least 100 of the Gazans who are helpless and hopeless, and nobody is actually caring about them. So if the Israeli, don't respect the international community, if they don't respect the UNRWA, if they don't open the border crossing to let these human aid reach the people who are actually desperate for it.
Okay, Abdel Bari Atwan, we are just weeks away from a change of administration here in the United States. You mentioned the United States several times there. Do you think there will be a difference once President-elect Trump becomes the new president?
Well, it could be worse, to be honest, because President Trump actually have a very good relation with Netanyahu. Actually, he said several times, Israel is small in size, and we want to enlarge it. It means adding the West Bank, or to be under full Israeli control. Also to add Gaza or annex Gaza to the Israel again. So they don't want people. They want land only, and they want to actually displace all the Palestinians, maybe push them to immigrate to other countries by force or by, sort of convincing. So we don't know yet what's the plan. But the problem, what we know in Gaza, that every day the Israeli kill more than 100 people from the Gazan people.
Right.
And Smotrich, who is the minister, said we want to reduce the Palestinian population in Gaza to half of the number now.
Okay, I want to turn to Akbar Dareini. The situation between Iran and Israel, I mean, the tensions there, they appear to have eased for now. Do you think that both sides can avoid a major escalation, or does that threat still exist?
That threat still exists. Iran is yet to respond to the latest Israeli attack on Iran. That breached many red lines. For the first time, Iran was directly attacked. So Iran is yet to respond to that attack. But in escalation ladder, there is a possibility that things may get out of control and turn into a full-fledged military conflict. That is what Iran has been trying to avoid. But given the fact that we are going to see a new administration in the White House, Iran is making its own calculations on how to treat Israel. It knows that Israel knows no borders. Israel is already preparing to hit Iranian allies and perhaps Iran itself. The Israelis are not hiding that. So Iran is now at the stage of increasing its deterrence power and making preparations to both respond to Israel and at the same time improve its own defenses to make sure that Israel will not succeed in inflicting a heavy blow next time if there is an exchange. But Iran is hoping that this could be averted in the coming weeks. But frankly speaking, I do not see any good signs on the Trump administration. The only good sign is that the Trump administration doesn't want the United States to be dragged into a full-fledged war in the Middle East. That's the only point of difference with the Netanyahu's warmongering administration. That's the only sign. Otherwise, I see Trump more hawkish, more anti-Iran than the Biden administration. Although major strategies do not change in the United States, but tactics may change.
Sarah, I want to ask you about some of the legal challenges that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is facing right now. But before that, just your response to what Abdel Bari Atwan said a moment ago about the Israeli goal being to reduce the population of Gaza, either by killing Palestinians there or by expelling them and then taking their land.
Well, I think the unfortunate reality is there were remarks made by Bezalel Smotrich, who is one of the most ultra-nationalist members of the current Israeli coalition, who did say something to the effect that either by voluntary immigration or by force, he would like to diminish the population of Gaza. I don't think this is a view that is shared widely by the entirety of the Israeli public, but there is an ongoing question of the elimination of Hamas as the leading force in Palestinian or in Gazan society as much as in governance, and what this means for the ability of Israel to live side by side in peace and security with Gaza going forward. But ethnic cleansing or population decimation or annihilation is not, I think, a goal that is widely shared by the vast majority of Israelis who found Bezalel Smotrich's remarks despicable. And as many members of society being Holocaust descendants who experienced ethnic cleansing and genocide in Europe are not keen to repeat that upon another population here in the Middle East.
Okay, let's turn to the plight facing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu right now. He has been ordered to appear to give testimony in the graft charges, the graft trial that he is facing right now. That's led to members of the cabinet actually sending a letter to the Israeli Attorney General asking for these hearings to be delayed while this crisis in Gaza continues. How much legal peril is the Prime Minister in right now?
I think the Prime Minister is in serious legal peril, and he's also in serious peril with the populace, who, over almost 75% of the Israeli public wants Benjamin Netanyahu to resign yesterday. And the ongoing stall tactics that members of Netanyahu's legal team and even now some of his political allies are using to prevent him from both standing trial in his own, criminal graft case, but also to take any responsibility in maybe standing, trial in some kind of future investigation into the events of October 7th, continues to be dragged out. And the Israeli public is really concerned about that. Netanyahu needs to answer the charges that he is facing, and there's no more room for delay. The idea that there is a perpetual war and that Netanyahu could not possibly divert his attention from it is only yet another reason for him to resign and to use his time wisely to face the charges against him instead of drawing the state and his citizenry into his own legal shenanigans.
Abdel, Bari, Atwan, the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, it is very tenuous, both sides accusing each other of violating the terms of that ceasefire, and Israel is threatening to expand its attacks on Lebanon if that truce collapses. Do you expect that ceasefire to hold, or could we see these clashes flare up again?
I think it will flare up again, because Netanyahu never respected any agreement he signed or agreed upon. This is the problem. He said clearly that I don't want to stop the war in Lebanon. I want, a short ceasefire only. And he actually violated this ceasefire agreement at least 200 times. And this is documented completely. So he actually wanted this agreement or ceasefire to concentrate on Gaza and on Iran in particular. He said that clearly. So I believe, this kind of violation of this ceasefire by Netanyahu, by the Israeli forces, preventing people from going back to their to villages, to their towns, and also shooting people. So every day the Israelis shot dead many people in Lebanon. Yeah. So how it is going to work? I don't believe there is any hope for this ceasefire to stand, simply because Netanyahu never respected any agreement, international or local agreement.
And we have to leave it there. Thank you to all of you for being with us. And that is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.